Okay, so I actually started out in cartography, and then I moved into user experience design. And over the years, I learned a lot of different good, practical, cost-effective user testing techniques that I've been able to bring back to cartography with me. And I thought I'd come share some of those examples and talk about some of those techniques. So out of curiosity, show of hands if you've been a part of, as a participant or as an administrator, of some form of user testing or user study. Oh, good. That's a pretty good number. So the way I kind of approach it is I look at user testing as detective work. And you're trying to investigate the truth about your design, if it's going to work for the target audience. So I broke this into 3 parts. First, I wanted to talk about some quick crowdsourced user testing. Then I wanted to talk about longer form moderated user testing. And then at the end, we're going to take a user test together. So if you have a phone or a laptop, I've done this with big groups before, we're going to take a test here, and then we're going to look at the results at the end. So for the crowdsourced user testing, I know there are a couple ways to do this. I know some people use Amazon Mechanical Turk to do this. There's a site I've used a lot called Usability Hub. They have a lot of pre-made tests, and they're really quick to do, and you get results within like 10 minutes to an hour. So I brought some samples. This was a project we did at Visionist. I don't want to go into too much detail, but just know it was an application where you could bring in different types of health data. And for the audience that we were targeting, we just kind of broke it into thirds, high, medium, low. And if you put on 2 layers at a time, we wanted to show a kind of a bivariate map, where all the with counties that were high in both, counties that were low in both, and everything in between. So I wanted to do some user testing on a couple different palettes we had, so I put it through Usability Hub. One of the tests they've got is a question test where you show someone a design, and then you just have them answer a series of questions in order. And the whole point is just that whenever I build these things is to just have people use this graphic, pull information out of it. And one of the top things they'll give you is they'll take all your testers and they'll give you an average of how long it took someone to use this to answer these questions. So I ran that for all 3 of these tests, the red palette, the teal palette, and the purple palette. And out of curiosity, show of hands, how many people think the red palette performed better? A couple? How many think the teal palette? And how many think the purple palette? I think that's probably the biggest. And it was actually the red one. And I can say up front, if you're going to start doing this, you're going to be humbled fast. I was actually very surprised. I thought it was going to be purple too. I was actually pretty surprised about this. And I was surprised, I guess it's a 16-second difference between the teal one. That was actually my favorite going in, and that did the worst. One of the great things about these tests is they'll let you download all the data that comes from it. So you'll know all the demographic information about who tested it. They'll even break down how long it took per question. So you know, maybe one question did do better on one palette than the other ones, and you can pull a lot of information out of this. And to run one of these tests, if you can keep it under 2 minutes, it only costs $40. So if you're working with a development team, that's like less than a billable hour for one of those guys. So there's another type of test they have called preference test. So I took the two shortest times, and I ran it through this. And all you do is just ask, which ones you like the most? It's totally just about aesthetics and how it looks. So we'll do the same thing. Show of hands who thinks the purple one's going to get more favorites. And how many think the red? It's probably a little more even. And that's good because they were actually very close to each other. And it did give me a message that you've got one that's in the lead, but it's not statistically significant. So you could either run it through more people. I ran it through 20 for this. Or you could just kind of take that information as it is. One of the nice things they do is, for this you can ask follow-up questions, and I do the same thing. I always ask the one you did pick, what did you like the most about it? And is there anything that you liked about the one that you didn't pick? I kind of try and go for pulling out the positives that people had. And one of the surprise things I found is that a lot of people picked this one because they thought the color palette matched the tone of the subject matter better, which I was pretty surprised about. So moderated user testing. takes a little longer. So I was hoping to try and bring some examples of that, but everything I've done so far is really, the samples I couldn't really bring, they're proprietary. So I've got a map-related piece that I'm going to be user testing this winter, hopefully with teachers and students. So I thought I'd talk about some of the ways of doing that using this as an example. This is an interactive piece. It works on your phone, works on desktops. It's an interactive 3D map where you can spin the globe, select little different points, or take a little step-by-step tour. And I'm hoping to try and user test this winter. So one of the hardest things I've found is finding recruits for this kind of user testing. If you've got existing customers who are willing to, that's great because you know they're going to fit your demographics and the user personas you're going to use. And when we started user testing with our actual customers, we actually found they really, really liked that. They felt like they were being listened to. The only caveat with that is that you can't really use the same person more than 2 or 3 times, or they start to feel like they're part of the production team, and then it's kind of not really, you start getting some bias from them at that point. You can also try putting up flyers at local colleges and schools. If your audience might be for marketers, then you can go to the marketing, wherever they have marketing classes, and put up some flyers. I found this example from University of Texas. And then you can kind of give a $25 Amazon gift card. College kids love that. And you also have to pay attention to concerns about privacy or intention. That's what I'm going through, trying to find user studies for the educational things, because I don't want teachers to feel like I'm trying to use their students for something. There's more privacy around testing with kids. So for the setup, I always have some kind of script prepared with some little annotations and possible follow-ups where things might go wrong. I always at least audio record them. It's great if you can screen record them. I've done them in person with somebody. I actually like doing them virtually better because then I get a good screen record of what's going on. And sometimes I pick up on little things they do with the mouse or they might have gotten confused. And another thing I learned is don't bother taking notes. You've really got to focus on what they're doing and come up with different follow-ups, or if you see them try and go somewhere else, maybe follow up with why they thought they were going to do one thing or the other. So for tone, I kind of try and do it where I'm approachable, that they feel comfortable talking to me, but not so much that they think we're being friends, because then they might not want to really tell you something bad if they don't like it. I've also been told that when I learned how to do this, I was taught that you have to, if you did the design, you do have to lie and say, I didn't make this, somebody else made this, I'm just doing the testing, or they're going to be too nervous to actually tell you if they don't like something. And you've got to tell them in some way, make them feel like they're the ones who are not being tested. You're testing the design, not them. And that's especially important with testing with kids in education, because they're so used to thinking like, this is a test I am taking. They got to break out of that. So in terms of the pieces of the test, I usually start off with asking about background. So if I were testing this with a teacher, I might have them tell me about, if you're going to use some kind of interactive piece with your class, walk me through your process. Like, how do you start it up? What do you project on? Things like that. I've done some moderated tests where somebody will spend 20 minutes just telling me about their day, and they come up with all these different pieces of contextual information about what they struggled with, and somebody bothers them when they try and do this, and it's all great, useful information when you think about your designs. I usually give a series of tasks to perform. I know with this Magellan piece, one of the things I'm going to ask them is to find where Magellan died halfway around the trip. I kind of have a suspicion that this piece needs more labels on all the points, but I'm kind of going to wait until I test it to see if that's actually true. If people really, really struggle with this, I think that might be true. And another thing I do is I always have a set of static alternative mock-ups prepared. So a lot of times I'll spend maybe 15, 20 minutes talking about a feature, watching somebody go through it, perform the tasks, and then I'll just show them a static of, so you just did that, what if we did it like this? And then sometimes I'll have instant reactions of, no, that. I like that. That is so much better. I've had people cut the question off to tell me, no, that. I like that so much better. One thing that you can't really do if you really want to do good user testing is you can't take your thing around the office and show it to other people, because there's too much bias of they know you. They might like you. They might not like you. They might know your client. They might know the team you're working on. They might, you're part of the same company or group with the same goals. And it really just doesn't work too well. If you really want to get creative, there's a way of underground user testing or guerrilla user testing. Put on a badge, make one up if you have to, go down to a bus stop, and just start talking to people. They will talk to you forever because they're bored and they're just waiting for a bus. And it's great to break. You get lots of different types of people who will do this for you. I actually had a plan to do this at the airport yesterday because that's another place. People are just bored sitting around. And it was so crowded, it was so massive, and it was so loud, I didn't think we'd get really good audio. And I might have cowered it out a little bit. So that's it for moderated. So let's try and take one. If you've got a laptop or a phone, this should work. Never done it with a group this big, but it should be fine. We're going to split the room in two. You guys are the left side, you guys are the right side. Another important thing, the last time I did this, people took a while because they thought I was trying to trick them and they were trying to figure out my trick, that I was hiding in the test. And there are no tricks. It's just simple, answer some questions. So here are the two tests. If you're on the left side of the room, you can scan that QR code or go to bluecorallearning.com/left. Or if you're on the right side, you can use the other QR code and go to /right. And I figure while you guys are doing this, we can do the Q&A session as well. If you guys have any questions we can talk about while everybody's taking the test. And then we'll look at the results live. Sure.
You said you do these things with students. What age group, how young students are you?
So I've worked with students as young as kindergarten. We did some testing with a pre-K product, but I wasn't involved in that one. I didn't start going to the user testing until we hit some kindergarten kids. Sure.
Have you done a significant amount of testing where you can actually start to establish certain principles or frameworks around this thinking that then you would have to run tests over and over again?
Sure, yeah. One of the most useful things I found as a designer is to just have like an established set of patterns that I can replicate, that I can remember and write rules around. I'll give you an example of one. I was helping to try and revamp a form that was all just straight inputs going down, and I did a whole bunch of research about what's already out there about when should you use radio buttons, when should you use check marks, when should you use drop downs, and I came up with something called the rule of sevens, where at 7, if you're under 7, use radio buttons. If you're above 7, start using drop downs, and if you're above that, above 17, use a searchable drop down. So I do try and write, some kind of rules or guidelines like that are easy to communicate to developers or other non-designers. Sure, in the back.
Have you worked with actual physical product mock-ups? And if so, how does that work, rather than being online on the screen?
Do you mean like a printed mock-up of something, or you mean like an actual figure, toy or object?
Printed object fiber, outside with real people rather than showing them on the screen.
Sure, yeah. I've done some with, I talked about the one of just have some static alternatives ready. I've done testing just off of statics before any development work starts at all. And it kind of works the same way where I might focus on one first and then show the alternatives. Anybody else? People stopped holding their devices, so I'm gonna move on, and we'll see how this turned out. These were the two maps. This is the 1968 presidential election. You've got a standard map on the left, cartogram on the right. The 3 questions: what country is the map showing? What candidate earned Nevada's electoral votes? And in how many different states did Wallace earn electoral votes? Let me jump out of here. Where's my mouse? Okay. So we'll do the cartogram first. We've got 35 responses. Sorry, I gotta move it over. 36 responses for the cartogram so far. Average 42 seconds. That's pretty good. I actually thought that was going to be longer. So we'll do the other map. 47 responses so far, all right? 42 seconds. Wow. I'm genuinely surprised right now that tied. And I've had tests tie the question test, and then I've had them tie the favorite test, and it all came down to just those couple of questions at the end of the preference test about what you like and don't like. Let me go back to the presentation. That's great. You genuinely surprised me from on stage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download that detailed data after this presentation, and I'm going to post some of the results on Twitter. I don't have a personal Twitter anymore, just the one for Blue Coral Learning. So at Blue Coral Learn, and I'll try and see, was one map better than the other for specific questions or things like that? Was mobile longer than desktop? I'll try and post some of those and give you a little more detail about how that went. And that's it. So thanks.